rain pounded relentlessly against the tin roof of Hope Haven Shelter, a steady rhythm that matched the quiet tension inside. Rows of kennels lined the dimly lit space, filled with restless movement. Dogs barking, tails wagging, paws scraping against metal bars. Yet, in the farthest corner, Bruno remained still. A lone German shepherd, his golden-brown fur dulled with time and neglect, lay curled in the shadows, his deep, knowing eyes fixed on the shelter gate. Volunteers moved around him, casting worried glances his way. He hadn't eaten much, hadn't moved all day. "He's losing hope," one of the workers murmured, shaking her head. Bruno didn't react. He barely blinked. It was as if he was waiting, for someone, for something. But the gate never opened for him, not anymore. Unlike the other dogs, Bruno never lunged forward when visitors entered. He didn't wag his tail or push his nose through the bars, pleading for attention. He remained eerily still, ears pricked slightly, his body tense. Every now and then, his gaze would flick toward the entrance just for a second. Then, as if remembering something painful, he'd lower his head again, his breaths slow and measured. Hope was a dangerous thing. It led to disappointment. Bruno had learned that the hard way. Shelter dogs either got chosen or forgotten. And forgotten dogs didn't last long here. The door creaked open, sending a gust of damp air into the room. Dr. Sarah Williams stepped inside, brushing a few raindrops from the sleeve of her jacket. The scent of damp fur and disinfectant filled her nostrils, an oddly familiar mix. She had come to volunteer, a decision she had made on impulse, a desperate attempt to silence the weight pressing against her chest these past few months. But as she scanned the rows of kennels, her gaze kept drifting toward the German shepherd in the farthest corner. The stillness, the silence, the unmistakable sorrow that hung over him like a heavy fog. Their eyes met. Bruno's dark, hollow stare locked onto Sarah's, and for a brief moment the noise of the shelter faded into the background. A shiver ran down her spine, not from the cold, but from something deeper. Recognition. She didn't know why, but the sadness in his eyes stirred something inside her, something she had spent months trying to bury. Loss, pain, loneliness. Bruno wasn't just another dog waiting for a home. He was something else. A mirror. Hope Haven was at full capacity. The director had been clear. If the numbers didn't drop soon, tough decisions would have to be made. Sarah glanced at the clipboard hanging outside Bruno's kennel. No recent inquiries, no potential adopters. She clenched her jaw. Bruno didn't have much time left. Sarah's fingers curled around the kennel's metal bars. Every instinct told her to walk away. She wasn't ready, not for this. But Bruno lifted his head slightly, his eyes searching hers. No excitement, no desperation, just quiet understanding. Her throat tightened. Maybe, just maybe, this wasn't an accident. Maybe they were both waiting for someone to open the door. Sarah stepped into the dimly lit kennel, the scent of damp concrete and old fur thick in the air. She knelt slowly, careful not to startle the large German shepherd curled in the corner. In her outstretched palm, she held a few liver treats, an offering of peace. Bruno didn't react. He remained still, his head resting on his paws, his dark eyes staring at something unseen, something only he could remember. Other dogs barked and whimpered around them, eager for attention, but Bruno remained silent. Sarah's chest tightened. He wasn't just sad, he was waiting. A sigh from behind broke the heavy silence. Shelter manager Linda leaned against the kennel door, arms crossed. "He's been like this since the day we found him," she murmured. Sarah glanced up. Where was he? Near the highway, he refused to leave a single spot, like he was waiting for someone. We checked for a chip, put up flyers, but no one ever came. Sarah looked back at Bruno. His unwavering stillness, his refusal to engage. It wasn't just grief, it was loyalty. Linda stepped forward, pulling a small worn collar from her pocket. The once bright blue fabric had faded, the stitching frayed. She handed it to Sarah, who traced the embroidered name with her fingertips. J.R., she read aloud. Linda nodded. That's all we have. No address, no phone number. Sarah clenched her jaw. The name on the collar felt like an unfinished sentence, a question left hanging in the air. Bruno had belonged to someone, a someone who had never come back. A familiar ache settled in Sarah's chest. Loss had a way of sinking into your bones, leaving behind a weight you carried forever. She had sworn never to put herself through that pain again. She studied Bruno, her fingers tightening around the collar. Could she handle another goodbye? Another loss? Bruno remained motionless, but something about him pulled at the walls she had built around herself. It was dangerous, this feeling. She had spent so long keeping her heart guarded. She couldn't risk opening it again, not for anyone, not even for him. As if sensing her turmoil, Bruno finally lifted his head. His gaze met hers, deep brown eyes locking onto her own. It was brief, just a flicker of recognition, but it sent a shiver through Sarah. In that moment, no words were spoken, but something shifted between them. A silent understanding. A shared grief neither of them could voice. Sarah swallowed hard. She should leave. She should walk away before she made a mistake. But she didn't. Instead of standing up, instead of turning away, Sarah reached forward and placed the faded blue collar on the kennel floor. "I'll see you tomorrow, Bruno," she whispered. It wasn't a promise. Not yet. But it was something. A thread connecting their wounded hearts. As Sarah walked away, she didn't see Bruno's head lift just a little higher. For the first time in weeks, he wasn't just waiting. He was watching. Each day, Sarah visits Bruno's kennel. The shelter's hallway echoes with the soft patter of her footsteps as she approaches. She doesn't expect much, only a chance to reach him, even if only in the smallest way. Today, like all the others, she kneels near the gate, holding out a handful of treats. Bruno lies there, still and unmoving, his gaze distant. He doesn't flinch, doesn't even acknowledge her presence. Sarah's voice breaks the silence as she gently reads aloud, her words flowing softly into the air, attempting to fill the emptiness between them. She knows it's a long shot. Bruno hasn't reacted to her in weeks. Yet she persists, placing food just out of reach, hoping it will be enough to nudge him from his silence. But Bruno remains indifferent. He watches her for a moment with those dark, heavy eyes that seem to carry the weight of years of untold stories. And then his gaze drifts away once more. Weeks pass, and Sarah's visits become more frequent, more hopeful. She has learned not to take it personally when Bruno avoids her, but even in his stillness, Sarah begins to notice the small things, subtle shifts that hint at something more. One morning, as she settles in her usual spot beside his kennel, she speaks his name softly. Bruno's ears twitch at the sound of her voice. It's slight, but it's there. She holds her breath for a moment, watching for a reaction, but nothing comes. As the days unfold, she notices more changes. His eyes, once perpetually fixed on the shadows of his past, now follow her with quiet curiosity. He doesn't approach, doesn't come closer, but she knows. There's something more than just disinterest now. Every glance, every twitch of his ears, feels like a tentative step toward something she's longed for, a chance for connection. One evening, as Sarah prepares to leave, she gathers her things, her heart heavy with the familiar ache of not having made much progress. She stands, turning toward the door, but something makes her stop. A soft, unexpected touch against her hand freezes her in place. Bruno, for the first time, reaches out. His nose brushes against her palm, gentle but unmistakable. Sarah's breath catches in her throat, her pulse quickening. She stands still, afraid to move, afraid to disturb the fragile moment. Bruno's eyes meet hers, deep and searching. His body is still, but there's something in the way he leans into her touch. A quiet invitation she can't ignore. A single tear slips down Sarah's cheek. She doesn't know if Bruno's gesture is a sign of trust or just a fleeting moment of curiosity, but in that instant she feels the bond between them grow stronger, like a thread pulling them together, one small tug at a time. But not everything is smooth sailing. Despite the progress they've made, Bruno's past still looms over them both. One day, Sarah opens the door to his kennel, her voice bright and encouraging. "Come on, Bruno, you're free to go. You've been in here long enough." Bruno doesn't move. She opens the door wide, allowing the shelter's warmth to spill into the cold outdoors. But still, Bruno hesitates. He stares, not at the open space beyond, but into the distance, eyes fixed on something invisible, something beyond her reach. Sarah feels a pang in her chest. She watches him for a moment, recognizing the way his body stiffens. There's fear in his stillness, but it's more than that. He seems to be waiting for something or someone to return. His loyalty to the past is evident, the unspoken weight of his memories trapping him in place. The door stands wide open, offering freedom, but Bruno can't take it. Not yet. Sarah spends the next few days trying to understand. She sits by his side for hours, watching him. His eyes dart nervously to the door, but he never moves. She starts to realize something she hadn't seen before. The fear isn't just about leaving. It's about what he's leaving behind. He's waiting for someone. Someone who hasn't come, someone who might never come again. The mystery of his past begins to unfold in her mind. She digs deeper, contacting shelters, trying to learn more about Bruno's previous life. But every lead comes up empty. No one claims him. No one comes for him. All Sarah knows is that Bruno is here, stuck between two worlds, the one he left behind and the one that could offer him a new beginning. As she sits by his side, she talks to him softly, hoping her voice can reach him. "I'm not asking you to forget," she says, her voice trembling with emotion. "But I'm here now. You don't have to wait anymore. I promise." A storm blows in one evening, a fierce crack of thunder followed by a flash of lightning that lights up the night sky. Sarah is at the shelter late, her eyes glued to the weather outside. She's preparing to leave when a sudden, desperate whine breaks through the storm. She turns in alarm to find Bruno, trembling in his kennel, his body rigid with fear. His eyes are wild, his breathing erratic, the panic that seizes him too much to contain. Sarah rushes to his side, her heart pounding in her chest. "It's okay, Bruno," she whispers, kneeling beside him. "You're safe. I'm here." But Bruno doesn't hear her. His body quakes with terror, and for a moment Sarah is afraid he might break under the weight of his fear. She reaches out, running her hand gently over his trembling body, whispering soothing words. Slowly he calms, but it's not enough. She feels the weight of his past, whatever trauma he's experienced, is still haunting him. But then something changes. As she continues to speak softly, Bruno leans into her, pressing his face against her side. His breathing begins to slow, the panic ebbing away as she continues to soothe him. She wraps her arms around him, holding him close. In that moment, Sarah realizes that this is more than just comfort. This is trust. And it's fragile, but it's there. For the first time, Bruno rests his head in Sarah's lap. His body relaxes under her touch, the tension melting away. The storm rages outside, but inside the kennel, there's a quiet peace. Bruno's breathing slows, his eyes half closed, and Sarah feels an overwhelming sense of relief wash over her. In that moment, everything changes. The walls that had kept them apart, his past, his fears, begin to crumble. What remains is something simple and pure: trust. Sarah knows in her heart that this is only the beginning. They've both fought hard to reach this point, and there will be more challenges ahead, but for now this bond, this connection, is enough. As Sarah strokes his fur, she whispers softly, "You're home now, Bruno. You don't have to wait anymore." And for the first time, Bruno's eyes meet hers, with a quiet understanding. The bond between them is no longer just a hope. It's real. Sarah sat at her small kitchen table, scrolling through an endless array of news articles on her laptop. Every lead she followed seemed to fall short, offering nothing about Bruno's past. Her fingers paused over an article, its headline catching her eye: "Local Soldier's Tragic Death. Companion Dog Remains Loyal." Sarah clicked on the link without a second thought. The photo accompanying the article struck her immediately. A soldier in uniform, his face strong yet somber, with Bruno lying beside him on the ground, head gently resting on the soldier's leg. The dog's eyes were full of sorrow, a devotion so clear it almost seemed to jump out of the page. A lump formed in Sarah's throat as she read the story. The soldier, James Rodriguez, had died in a car crash just outside the small town where Bruno had been found. The article mentioned how, after the crash, the dog had refused to leave his side, staying with the body for days. Bruno had waited, without food, without water, for the man who would never return. The photo, faded and worn from age, told a story that words couldn't capture. Bruno, lying motionless next to the soldier, had been more than a pet. He was a companion, a protector. Sarah's heart ached as she continued reading about the bond between James and Bruno. James had adopted him from the shelter years before, a young soldier returning home from deployment. They were inseparable. Bruno had been there through every deployment, every battle, every moment of fear. They were brothers in arms, bound by more than just their time together. And now, in this moment of heartbreak, Sarah understood. Bruno wasn't just lost, he was grieving. Sarah sat back, her mind reeling from the discovery. It all made sense now, the way Bruno sat by the door, the way he stared out into the distance. He wasn't waiting for an owner, not in the way she had thought. He wasn't waiting for someone to come and adopt him. He had been waiting for James, his friend, his family. And now Sarah realized the devastating truth: James was never coming back. The realization cut through her like a sharp blade, leaving her breathless and stunned. Bruno's grief was so deep, so all-encompassing, that it had frozen him in time. His loyalty had turned into a prison, trapping him in a moment that no longer existed. A tear slipped down Sarah's cheek, her heart heavy with the weight of what she now understood. She had thought she was helping Bruno find a new home, but what she had found was the remnants of a love so pure, so powerful, it transcended even death. Now, Sarah was faced with a dilemma that weighed on her soul. Could she help Bruno move on from his past, or would she let him remain in this endless cycle of waiting, lost in his sorrow? The shelter had already warned her. Dogs who didn't get adopted after a certain period would be euthanized. Sarah's heart clenched as she looked at Bruno, his eyes still distant. still haunted by memories of James. "Bruno," she whispered, kneeling down beside his kennel, her voice barely a tremor. "I don't want to let you go, but I don't know how to help you if you can't let go of him. How can I help you heal if you're stuck in the past?" Bruno looked at her, and for the briefest of moments Sarah swore she saw a flicker of understanding in his eyes. But it was fleeting. The bond they shared was growing stronger each day, but this was different. This wasn't just about offering him love. It was about helping him overcome a loss so profound. Sarah wasn't sure if either of them was ready for that journey. The phone call came just a few days after Sarah's heart-wrenching discovery. It was the shelter, their voice cold and matter-of-fact, informing her that Bruno's time was running out. Due to funding cuts, all long-term unadopted dogs would be euthanized in 1 week. Sarah's stomach twisted into knots. This couldn't be happening. She couldn't let Bruno end up like this. Not when she was finally starting to understand him. Not when there was a chance, however small, that she could help him. "Please," Sarah begged, her voice cracking. "I need more time. Please don't take him." The shelter worker on the other end sighed, but agreed to give her a few more days. Sarah knew she had no time to waste. The decision came quickly, as if the weight of it had been hanging over her all along. Sarah couldn't bear the thought of losing Bruno, of letting him slip away without giving him a chance to heal. And so, with a sense of urgency that matched the beating of her heart, she made a choice that would change everything. She would take him home. But as she loaded Bruno into her car, she knew the road ahead would be difficult. Would he accept her? Would he ever stop longing for James? Her heart pounded in her chest as she glanced over at Bruno, who sat quietly in the back seat, his eyes filled with uncertainty. She knew he didn't trust easily, and this was the ultimate test. Would he open his heart again? That night, as Sarah sat on the couch in her living room, Bruno stood by the door, his body rigid. He whined softly, a low, mournful sound that tugged at Sarah's heart. She could feel his pain, his longing for the past. She whispered softly, "I know you miss him, Bruno. I know you do, but you don't have to be alone anymore." For a moment, it felt like nothing had changed. Bruno's eyes were distant, searching the room as if hoping for something, or someone, that wasn't there. But then something shifted. As the night wore on, Bruno cautiously approached the couch, his movements hesitant, his gaze still unsure. Slowly, he lay down beside Sarah, his body still tense but no longer at the door. As the hours passed, the room grew quieter, and Bruno curled up closer, his body inching toward Sarah's side. He didn't fall asleep right away, but his presence, the warmth of his body against hers, spoke louder than words. For the first time, he allowed himself to be vulnerable with her, and Sarah, her heart full of hope, gently stroked his fur, whispering words of comfort. This was just the beginning. But it was a beginning, and that was enough. The air was crisp that morning, a soft hint of autumn brushing the ground as Sarah stepped out onto the porch, the first streaks of sunlight cutting through the mist. Her boots crunched on the gravel path as she began her usual walk, the cool breeze carrying a quiet promise of peace. She glanced back toward the door, expecting the familiar hesitation, the slight pause Bruno always gave before following her. But today was different. Something in the air felt new. She didn't turn to check on him, she knew. And then, as if answering an unspoken question, she heard his heavy pause follow, steady and without hesitation. Bruno was beside her, walking at her side, not looking back, not lingering near the door. It was as if, for the first time, he wasn't haunted by the shadows of his past. He was finally walking forward with her. They walked in silence, the soft rustling of the fallen leaves beneath their feet marking the only sound. Sarah glanced down at Bruno. His posture had changed. No longer the cautious, hesitant dog of weeks past. His steps were more sure, more confident, as if the past no longer weighed on him. It struck Sarah like a gentle wave, overwhelming and tender. This was it. This was the moment she had been waiting for him to trust again, to finally move forward. They had been through so much together, and now they were here, side by side. Bruno lifted his head and looked ahead, his eyes bright and clear, a silent testament to the strength of the bond they had built. He wasn't just walking with her anymore. He was truly following her, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. That afternoon, after their walk, Sarah sat at the kitchen table, her heart pounding with an unspoken resolution. Bruno had been with her for weeks now, but she had never fully allowed herself to call him her own. There was always that lingering uncertainty, that fear of getting too attached, of loving him only to lose him. But as she stood up, she knew. Today was the day. She went to the drawer and pulled out a small, shiny blue collar. She had planned it all. His name, his new identity, one that would finally mark his place in her life. Sarah sat down and gently placed the collar around Bruno's neck, the soft fabric cool against his fur. "Bruno Rodriguez," she whispered, reading the engraved name aloud. It felt right. His name was no longer just a remembrance of a soldier's sacrifice. It was a name that carried the weight of his new life. It was a name that was his. "You belong here now." Bruno turned his head slightly, sensing the change. His ears perked up, and he nuzzled against her hand. There was no fear in his eyes, only warmth, a subtle acceptance of what she was offering him. A new life, a new home. Bruno sat at Sarah's feet as she stood by the window, watching the sun set over the horizon. She thought of James Rodriguez, the soldier who had loved him. She thought of the tragic loss, the empty years of waiting, and the hope that had died alongside him. But now there was more to Bruno's story. His past wasn't erased. It was part of the man he had become, and Sarah would never ask him to forget. She wasn't trying to replace that love, only to offer him a new chapter, one filled with healing and acceptance, and the kind of love that didn't need to be explained. As she glanced down at Bruno, she smiled softly. "You'll never forget him, will you?" she murmured. Bruno responded with a slow, gentle wag of his tail, his eyes still filled with that distant sorrow, but no longer burdened by it. Together they had found a way to honor his past, and in doing so embrace the future. It wasn't easy for Sarah to admit, but she had spent so many years avoiding attachments, afraid to open herself to the kind of love that could hurt her. She had always been afraid of loss. But now, as she sat on the couch, Bruno lying beside her, his head resting in her lap, Sarah realized something she hadn't expected. Love didn't erase the past. It made it meaningful. She had feared that loving him would somehow diminish his past, that it would be a betrayal. But instead, each quiet moment, each small step forward, made the past matter even more. His scars, his pain, they didn't disappear. But in giving him her love, she had found healing for both of them. Bruno stirred slightly, raising his head to look up at her. His eyes were warm, full of trust. Sarah stroked his fur gently. "We're in this together, Bruno, you and me." He rested his head again, as if understanding that this bond, this unspoken promise, was all they needed. Later that week, Sarah and Bruno took their usual walk to the lakeside, the soft wind carrying away the last remnants of autumn's chill. Bruno, no longer bound by the weight of his past, moved with a sense of peace Sarah had never seen before. His tail swished lazily behind him, his body relaxed. They reached their favorite spot by the water, a place where Sarah often came to reflect. As they sat in silence, the stillness of the world around them seemed to mirror the stillness in Bruno's heart. The weight of his grief was no longer heavy. It was simply a memory now, drifting away like the ripples in the water. Sarah closed her eyes, letting the wind kiss her face. "Goodbye," she whispered, her voice soft, filled with a quiet reverence. Goodbye to the pain that had held them both captive. Goodbye to the fear that had kept them from moving forward. In the space between them, the love they had nurtured grew stronger, carrying with it the weight of the past and the lightness of the future. As Sarah and Bruno returned home that evening, the familiar warmth of the house greeted them. Bruno walked beside her, no longer searching for someone else. His steps were sure, and his eyes, once filled with sorrow, were now bright with gratitude. When they entered the house, Bruno paused, his gaze shifting to Sarah. His tail wagged slowly, and for the first time there was no hint of uncertainty, no longing for the past. This was home. Sarah knelt down and looked into his eyes. "You're not alone anymore, Bruno. You've found your home, your family." Bruno responded by nuzzling against her, his eyes soft, filled with contentment. They had both come a long way, and now they could walk forward together, side by side, knowing that no matter what the future held, they had each other. Bruno was home, and so was she. Love, in its most unexpected form, can find us when we are lost and broken. Sarah never imagined that, after losing so much, she would be gifted with such a profound bond. Bruno, once a broken soul, had walked into her life in the most heartbreaking way, and yet, together, they had found something beautiful. It wasn't just the healing of one heart, but the intertwining of two lives, proving that love isn't something we chase. It finds us when we are ready, even in the most unexpected of moments. Sarah thought that healing meant forgetting the pain of her past, the love she had once shared, and the life she had once known. But as time went on, she realized the truth. Healing doesn't erase the past. Instead, it creates space for new love, new memories, and new hope to grow alongside the old ones. Bruno didn't replace the love she had lost. He gave her the ability to cherish both the love she had and the love she had yet to discover. Bruno's loyalty wasn't just in the way he followed Sarah through the hardest days of her life. It was in the way he waited patiently for her heart to heal. His devotion was quiet but steadfast, never asking for anything but the chance to be loved. In return, Sarah realized that true loyalty doesn't demand attention or praise. It simply remains, enduring through time, offering a silent promise that never fades. Bruno's love had become a quiet anchor in her storm. At first, Sarah had thought she was saving Bruno. She thought that by adopting him, she would be the one providing him a home, a place to heal. But in the end, it was Bruno who had shown her what home really meant. Home was not just a place, it was the feeling of being understood, loved, and accepted. Bruno had given Sarah the gift of finding a home within each other, where the pain of their pasts could finally rest, and only love would remain. Every ending, every heartbreak, carries within it the seed of a new beginning. For Sarah and Bruno, their second chance wasn't something either of them had been seeking, but when it found them, it changed everything. The fear of opening their hearts again was overshadowed by the quiet realization that sometimes the greatest gift life can offer is the opportunity to try once more. A second chance, not just for survival, but for thriving in the love they had both feared to embrace.